My daughter-in-law ripped the will in half, laughing. 46 million, she said, and not a dime for the grieving mother. Then she tossed my suitcase down the stairs and slammed the door in my face. But why did the lawyer show up the next morning with armed officers and a sealed letter from my son? What had he known? Before he died. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The sky wept on the morning we buried my son. Cold November rain slid down the black umbrellas gathered at Cedar Hill Cemetery in Hartford, as if heaven itself had chosen to mourn alongside me. My Jonathan, my only child, the boy I had raised alone after my husband's sudden passing, was lowered into the earth that day, and with him went the part of my heart that had kept me whole. I stood there, 68 years old, my legs trembling beneath a dress that felt suddenly too heavy for me, though I told myself I was strong enough to stand, strong enough to endure. But no mother is ever strong enough for this. Ellie, you should sit down, and the voice came gently from my nephew Tom, who had always looked after me as if I were his own mother. His hand touched my arm, steady and protective, but I shook my head. I'm fine, I whispered, though nothing inside me was fine. Just a few feet away stood Caroline, my daughter-in-law. Even in grief, she looked polished, composed, untouchable. The black veil fell softly across her perfect face, her slender figure draped in silk that seemed more suited for a fashion spread than a funeral. She did not waver, did not let a single strand of hair fall out of place. Watching her, I felt that old familiar ache, the quiet reminder that I had never been enough in her eyes, and perhaps not even in my son's once she entered his world. Beside her were my grandchildren. Lucas, only 10, stood stiff and solemn, his small chin lifted as though he were already trying to be the man of the house. Sweet little Emily clutched a bouquet of white lilies so tightly that the stems bent in her small fists. Her eyes, wide and searching, met mine across the grave. For one fragile moment, I thought she might run into my arms. But Caroline's firm hand pressed her shoulder back into place. My granddaughter lowered her gaze, and the distance between us felt wider than the dark hole waiting to receive my son. The pastor spoke of Jonathan's life, his accomplishments, his success, the company he had built from nothing, the wealth he had gathered, the generosity he had shown to colleagues and friends. Beautiful words, but to me they fell hollow. None of that mattered now. What mattered was the boy who once tugged at my hand on his way to school, the young man who had studied into the night at our kitchen table while I graded papers from my classroom. He was not just a businessman, not just a name on a balance sheet. He was my child. He was only 42 when the aneurysm struck him down in the middle of a late meeting. No warning, no chance for goodbye. A phone call at 3 a.m, and my world ended. I dropped my gaze to the polished wood of the coffin. My heart whispered a silent farewell. Goodbye, my boy. My voice barely carried above the rain, yet I hoped somehow he heard me. When the hymn ended, and people began tossing roses into the grave, I stepped forward with mine, a white rose. The flower Jonathan always said reminded him of me. I had grown them in the small garden of my modest apartment, the place he often visited for Sunday dinners. The petals looked fragile against the dark earth. Grandma? A small hand tugged at mine. Lucas had come to stand beside me. His face, so much like Jonathan's when he was a boy, was drawn tight with confusion and pain. His voice trembled when he asked, "Is Dad really down there?" I swallowed hard, steadying myself for his sake. "Just his body, sweetheart. What made your father who he was, his love, his kindness, his clever mind, those things live on in you and your sister." He nodded, though I could see he did not fully understand. Then, in a whisper, he added, "Mom says we're moving to California. Are you coming with us?" California. The word struck me like thunder. Until that moment, I had heard nothing of such plans. My apartment was only 20 minutes from Jonathan's house. I had seen the children every week of their lives. The thought of them being taken across the country, of losing the last piece of my son, made the earth tilt beneath me. Before I could answer, Caroline appeared at Lucas's side. Her perfume expensive, sharp cut through the damp air. "Lucas, go back to your place," she said. Her voice clipped, not unkind, but with that same finality she always carried. He obeyed at once, his small shoulders squared, as if to contain all that grief alone. I watched him retreat, and the emptiness inside me spread wider. When the ceremony ended, I followed the others back to the mansion Jonathan had bought only 2 years before. I should have felt at home there. It was, after all, my son's house, but instead I felt like an intruder in a world polished and grand beyond my reach. Strangers mingled in black suits, their conversations hushed, their eyes shifting toward Caroline. Champagne glasses clinked while whispers of inheritance and succession floated in the air. It was not grief I heard in their voices, it was speculation. I sat quietly in a corner beside my old friend Dorothy, listening, watching Caroline glide through the room like a first lady receiving dignitaries. She accepted condolences with graceful nods, never faltering. Yet when her gaze flicked toward me, I caught it, that glimmer of calculation, something cold and certain behind her perfect mask. It was then I knew. The funeral was not the end of my heartbreak. It was only the beginning. After the guests began to thin out, the tension in the room only thickened. I sat quietly, my hands folded tightly in my lap, listening to Dorothy murmur something sympathetic beside me, though the words barely registered. My thoughts had narrowed to a single point of dread. California. Caroline hadn't mentioned it to me, not once. Yet she had already spoken of it to Lucas. And in that moment, I understood what she intended. She was going to take the children and leave. Just like that, after everything, after all the years I'd poured into helping raise them while their father built his company, while she climbed the social ladders of Hartford's elite, she was going to erase me. No discussion. No consideration. Only quiet, cold resolve. "Ellie," Dorothy said softly, drawing my eyes back to her. "There's something else. I overheard one of the executives say that Caroline requested the reading of the will today immediately. Right here, at the reception. End of tree." I blinked. "Today? That's not customary, is it?" Dorothy shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not unless someone has something they want to control, to quickly." My heart pounded. I felt it in my throat, in my ears. I should have known. Within minutes, Caroline's voice rang clear over the hush of clinking glasses and murmured condolences. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, standing near the marble fireplace, her poise flawless. "If I may have your attention, at my request, the family attorney, Mr. Whitaker, will conduct a brief reading of Jonathan's last will and testament here and now, with the immediate family and relevant parties present." People looked at one another in surprise, some raising brows, some excusing themselves quietly as instructed. Within moments, the grand parlor emptied, leaving only a handful of us. Caroline, Lucas, and Emily, seated close by. Mr. Whitaker, briefcase in hand, 2 of Jonathan's senior executives, and Tom, who came to stand quietly behind me like a silent guardian. I sat in one of the large, stiff armchairs, feeling small and out of place. My black dress clung to me uncomfortably, still damp from the rain, the chill of the cemetery lingering in my bones. Across from me, Caroline sat in Jonathan's chair, an imposing high-backed piece of dark wood and leather that had always seemed more throne than office seat. She looked perfectly at ease in it, like she had been waiting to claim it. Mr. Samuel Whitaker, our family's attorney for over 20 years, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "With your permission," he said, looking toward Caroline, not me, "I'll begin." She gave him a small nod, one of those effortless gestures that carried more command than most people's words. He opened a leather folder and began, "This is the last will and testament of Jonathan Edward Barnes, dated the 12th of June, 2010. In it, he expresses his wishes with clarity and deliberation." The legal language rolled out slowly, heavily, filling the ornate room with the weight of finality. "To my beloved wife, Caroline Reed Barnes," Mr. Whitaker read, "I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes all properties, residential and commercial, in Hartford, Boston, and San Diego. I bequeath all investments, financial holdings, personal belongings, and my ownership stake in Barnes Tech Solutions, currently valued at approximately $46 million. My breath caught. "All of it?" "To Caroline," he repeated, as if to make sure no one had misheard. With full legal custody of our minor children, Lucas and Emily Barnes, and complete discretion regarding their upbringing, education, and residence. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Complete discretion. Those words echoed through my chest like gunfire. She could move them across the country. Tomorrow, no court would stop her, and I would have no say. Tom's hand clamped gently on my shoulder. I hadn't realized I was gripping the arms of the chair so tightly until then. Mr. Whitaker continued, his voice steady but with an edge of discomfort. To my colleagues at Barnes Tech Solutions, I extend my gratitude for your loyalty and service. To the employees and developers, may you carry forward our mission with integrity and passion. There was a pause, and then nothing. No mention of me. Not a single sentence. Not even a token gift. No words of affection. Nothing to suggest that I, his mother, even existed. I had never cared about money, not once. But this erasure? It was like losing him all over again, only this time, it was intentional. I raised my hand. "Mr. Whitaker," I said, my voice weaker than I would have liked. Was there nothing set aside for me? He looked at me with an expression of genuine regret. "Mrs. Barnes, I'm afraid there's no specific bequest to you in this document." The room fell silent. Then, Caroline spoke, her tone icy smooth. "Jonathan always assumed I would look after your needs, Ellie. I'm sure that's what he intended." Her words burned more than any absence in the will. It was the tone patronizing, final. She might as well have said, "You're obsolete." "Don't worry," she added, lifting her chin. "We'll keep you updated once we're settled on the West Coast." Something inside me cracked. Before I could speak, Mr. Whitaker held up his hand. "If I may, there is an addendum." Caroline turned sharply. "An addendum? That's not part of the executed version. I was there when he signed it." Mr. Whitaker opened a second folder and retrieved a single sheet of paper. This was filed separately, with myself and 2 of my partners as witnesses. Jonathan requested it be kept confidential and revealed only after the primary reading. He cleared his throat and read, "In the event that my wife, Caroline Reed Barnes, should attempt to separate my mother, Eleanor Barnes, from our children or demonstrate contempt, cruelty, or exclusion toward her, this will is rendered null and void, and the following distribution shall take immediate effect." I sat bolt upright. Caroline paled. "In such case," Whitaker continued, 80% of my estate, including controlling shares in Barnes Tech Solutions, shall pass to my mother, Eleanor Barnes. 20% shall remain with my wife. Furthermore, joint custody of our children, Lucas and Emily, shall be shared between Eleanor Barnes and Caroline Barnes. Neither party shall relocate the children without the other's written consent." Silence. Stunned, disbelieving silence. Then Caroline stood, slowly, like a cat preparing to pounce. "This is outrageous," she hissed. "This clause, it's fabricated. I'll contest it." "You're welcome to try," Mr. Whitaker replied calmly. "But I should advise you that Jonathan recorded a video to accompany this clause." He opened his briefcase, removed a small digital recorder, and placed it on the table. Caroline lunged for it, but Tom was faster. He stepped between them, one hand raised in quiet warning. "That's enough," he said. Caroline froze, glaring at him, then at me. "You knew," she said. "You and Jonathan, you planned this together behind my back." "I didn't know," I whispered. "He never told me." "Liar," she spat. Then, like something in her snapped, she pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're nothing. Your life ended with his. You're not family anymore." There were audible gasps. Mr. Whitaker looked solemn. "With that statement," he said, turning off the recorder, "the clause is triggered. The estate shall be distributed accordingly." Caroline's knees buckled slightly. She clung to the edge of Jonathan's chair, her face a twisted mask of rage and disbelief. I sat still, reeling. Not from triumph, no. This didn't feel like a victory. It felt like another kind of grief. One Jonathan had foreseen and tried quietly, gently, to spare me from. He had known. He had known who she truly was, and he had protected me, even in death. I looked at Lucas and Emily, still silent, still watching, and I knew that what mattered now wasn't the money or the house or even the company. It was them, and whatever came next, I would not let them be taken from me. I sat frozen in that grand room, unsure if I was breathing. Around me, silence fell like a curtain thick, uncomfortable, absolute. The lawyer's voice, the threats, Caroline's venomous outburst, it all echoed in my mind, colliding with the impossible truth. I now held 80% of my son's legacy, not just the house, not just the money, everything, and I had no idea what to do with it. Across from me, Caroline had gone pale. The fury on her face was no longer regal or restrained. It was feral. Her lips moved, but no words came. One hand gripped the chair where Jonathan used to sit, her knuckles white. I watched her composure dissolve like sugar in hot tea. "This is a trick," she said at last, her voice low and raw. "He would never do this to me. I was his wife, the mother of his children." Mr. Whitaker remained seated, calm as a pond. Jonathan's instructions were explicit, and before you consider challenging this in court, you should know he took further precautions. "What precautions?" she hissed. Without a word, Mr. Whitaker reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim laptop. He opened it, clicked a few keys, and turned the screen toward us. There he was, Jonathan, alive, strong, sitting behind this very desk in the office we now occupied. His eyes were serious but soft, and his voice when he spoke was like balm and blade all at once. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm gone, and something has gone wrong at the reading of my will." Caroline staggered back a step. "Caroline," he continued, "I hope you never gave them reason to activate this clause. I hope grief softened your heart. But if it didn't, if you tried to cut my mother out of the children's lives, if you showed her the contempt, I feared you've left me no choice." Caroline's mouth opened, closed. Jonathan's voice carried on. "I've seen the patterns, the cancellations, the missed dinners, the little comments when you thought no one was listening. I let it slide, always hoping time would bring you closer. But deep down, I knew who you were." Next to me, Tom stood very still. His hand no longer rested on my shoulder. It had curled into a fist at his side. "You never understood my mother," Jonathan said. "You saw her simplicity as weakness. Her modest apartment, her thrift store clothes, her roses blooming in chipped pots. You mistook that for smallness. But I am who I am because of her. She raised me after Dad died. She worked 2 jobs so I could go to Yale. She never once asked me for anything. That's the kind of strength you never bothered to learn." And I felt my throat tighten. His words, his voice reached into places inside me I thought had gone numb. Jonathan turned slightly toward the camera. "Mom," he said softly, "if you're seeing this, I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't protect you better in life. But I've done what I can now. The rest is in your hands." Then the screen went dark. Silence again. But not the kind that brought peace. It was the kind that followed an earthquake. Caroline broke first. "You can't just erase me," she cried, stepping forward, heels clicking across the hardwood. "I was with him for 10 years. I gave him a family. You can't take this away from me." I rose slowly, my knees stiff, my heart heavy. "I didn't take anything from you, Caroline," I said. Jonathan made his choice. "You manipulated him," she shouted. "You always poisoned him against me." "That's enough," Tom said sharply, stepping between us. "No," she spat. "You think I don't see what's happening? You've wanted me out of the picture for years. You did that yourself," he snapped. Mr. Whitaker's voice cut through the tension. "Caroline, there's more." She froze. Jonathan left documentation, audio recordings, emails, financial records. "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled now. He opened another file. "He discovered your relationship with Jeffrey Collins, the CFO at Axis Tech." Gasps. Evan Tom looked stunned. "That's a lie," Caroline whispered. "You have no proof." "We have emails," Whitaker said. "Phone records, a private investigator's report, all signed, all time-stamped." "You were cheating?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. "And that's not all," Whitaker continued. "In the weeks leading up to Jonathan's death, you contacted 3 real estate agents in California. You attempted to authorize the sale of the Hartford estate and initiated paperwork to transfer school records for the children." "Stop it," she hissed. "You did all of it in secret. he said. You withheld these actions from Jonathan. He documented everything. She turned toward me, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You must be so proud of yourself. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. She looked at Mr. Whitaker. So what now? You expect me to just pack a bag and walk away? No, he replied. Jonathan still left you 20% of the estate. Joint custody. You still have rights. But not power, she said coldly. Tom crossed his arms. That's what this was always about for you, wasn't it? Caroline turned to the children, who had sat through the chaos with wide, terrified eyes. Lucas, Emily, come on, we're leaving. Lucas stood, unsure. Emily didn't move. I said, come on, and… No, Emily whispered. I want to stay with Grandma. Caroline looked like she'd been slapped. What? I want to stay with Grandma, Emily repeated, louder this time, tears running down her cheeks. Caroline's mouth opened, then closed. She looked utterly undone. Lucas stepped beside his sister. Just for tonight, he said. We'll come home later. But she needs us, and we need her. They didn't ask. They didn't beg. They just stood there, small and solemn and brave. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Jonathan hadn't just protected me in his will. He'd raised his children to see me, to love me, to choose me. Caroline turned away. Fine, she muttered. You want her? You can have her. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, her heels echoing like the last clap of thunder in a passing storm. The room was still again. Mr. Whitaker began packing his papers. Tom walked over to the children and wrapped an arm around both of them. I lowered myself into the chair Jonathan used to sit in. It was warm. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own family. I felt like I'd come home. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet without Jonathan. Too large. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a memory. I wandered the halls barefoot, my long sweater pulled tight around me, trying to make peace with the idea that this place, his place, was now mine. Lucas and Emily had fallen asleep in the guest room, curled up like kittens on the same bed, their faces soft in slumber. I stood at the doorway for a long time just watching them. How had we gotten here? A week ago, I was still a retired schoolteacher, living in a modest apartment filled with old books and secondhand furniture. Now I was the guardian of 2 young children and heiress to a tech empire I barely understood. The will had changed everything. Yes, but it was Jonathan who had forced me to stand up to take the torch he could no longer carry. And I would not drop it. The next morning, Tom arrived early with a bag of bagels and a fresh pot of coffee, knowing full well I hadn't eaten anything decent in days. He had always been thoughtful like that since the day his own mother, my sister, passed away, and I helped raise him while juggling my teaching job and Jonathan's homework. We sat at the kitchen island, the same one Caroline had wanted to replace with imported marble, sipping our coffee in silence for a while. I still can't believe he planned all that, Tom finally said. I nodded. He must have known something was coming. The aneurysm, maybe there were signs he never told us. He kept secrets, Tom murmured, but not the kind that hurt. He protected you. And the kids. I looked down at my hands, worn, freckled, still stained with rose soil even now. I'm not the kind of person who runs companies, Tom. You're the kind of person who raised the man who did, he said. That counts for something. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. I didn't want to show you this yesterday, he said. Not with everything going on, but I think you need to see it now. I opened the folder. Meeting notes, internal memos, emails between department heads, and one name that showed up too many times. Richard Hale. I looked up. Who is he, really? Coup, Tom said. Chief Operating Officer. He's been with Barnes Tech for 7 years. John trusted him, at least in the beginning. Edu. And now? Tom took a breath. I've been doing some digging since John passed. There are inconsistencies in expense reports. Projects signed off without proper oversight, and the Phoenix project John's final focus has been redirected. My heart skipped. Redirected how? Tom tapped the papers. Richard's been pulling resources away from education and health applications, shifting them toward defense contracts, government ties. There's something happening inside Barnes Tech, Ellie, and it's not what John intended. I sat back, stunned. I need you to come to Boston, Tom said gently. You're the majority shareholder now. You have the power to demand transparency. I stared at the folder again. I was a grandmother, a retired teacher. I had no business marching into a boardroom. But I thought of Jonathan, of the weight in his voice when he spoke in that video, of how carefully he planned everything, knowing I'd be here now. He had trusted me with this. I'll go, I said. Tom smiled. That's my girl. The drive to Boston felt like stepping into another life. Tom did most of the talking while I watched the highway blur past. Skyscrapers soon replaced trees. We parked beneath a glass tower with the Barnes Tech logo etched into its facade. Inside, everything gleamed. Steel, chrome, glass. Young professionals in sharp suits strode past, their eyes on tablets, their mouths murmuring jargon I didn't understand. I felt out of place, like someone's grandmother had wandered into a science fiction film. Tom led me up to the executive floor. People stared when I stepped off the elevator. Whispers followed me down the hall. Some looked curious. Others, wary. When we entered the conference room, Richard Hale was already there. He stood to greet me. Tall, immaculately dressed, early 40s, with slick hair and a politician's smile. Mrs. Barnes, he said smoothly. It's an honor. I was so sorry to hear about Jonathan. He was a visionary. I offered my hand. His shake was firm but cold. Thank you, I said. I understand you've been running things. He gestured to the chair at the head of the table, Jonathan's chair. Of course. But now that you're here, we're happy to have your input. I sat down slowly. The room filled with other executives, men and women in suits, speaking in acronyms and graphs. The Phoenix Project was mentioned several times. I interrupted. What exactly is the current direction of Phoenix? Richard smiled again. Too confident. We've expanded it, he said, beyond education and diagnostic tools. We're exploring partnerships with defense contractors. The Department of Defense is interested in neurological screening for pilots, remote soldier training, and even predictive combat analytics. I blinked. Combat analytics? It's cutting edge, he said proudly. That's not what my son built it for, I replied quietly. He paused, just a fraction too long. Mrs. Barnes, with all due respect, times change. If we want to stay competitive— No, I said. The room went still. No, I repeated. Phoenix was my son's vision. And if you're diverting it into something he wouldn't recognize, then we have a problem. Richard's smile faltered. Perhaps you'd prefer to schedule a private meeting. No need, I said. We'll continue this discussion with full transparency. And just like that, I saw the shift in the room. Some of the younger team members straightened in their seats. A few even looked relieved. Tom caught my eye and nodded slightly. I had done something right. When the meeting ended, Richard was the first to leave. But not before leaning in close and saying, "Running a tech company isn't like raising a child, Mrs. Barnes. It's a jungle. You may not be cut out for it." I looked him square in the eye. Maybe not, I said. But I raised the man who built the map, and I've been through worse than jungle. He left without another word. That night, back in Hartford, I sat at Jonathan's desk and opened his journal. He had always kept one, not public, not digital, just a leather-bound notebook filled with his thoughts, ideas, and sketches. And there it was. Phoenix. Page after page of diagrams, flowcharts, questions scrawled in the margins. But more than that, a mission. Jonathan hadn't just wanted to change education or medicine. He wanted to save lives. Phoenix had the capacity to detect early signs of cognitive decline. Alzheimer's, autism, even PTSD. It could prevent suffering. And they wanted to weaponize it. I closed the journal and looked out the window. The battle had only just begun, but I wasn't afraid. For the first time since Jonathan died, I felt alive again. It started with a yellow sticky note. I found it wedged inside Jonathan's journal, stuck between 2 pages filled with Phoenix design sketches. The handwriting was unmistakably his, slanted, a little rushed, as though he had scribbled it down in the middle of a thought he couldn't afford to lose. If anything happens, look in the garden shed. Back wall, behind the tools. I sat there at his desk for a full minute, just staring at the note. It was such a Jonathan thing, half secret, half invitation. He used to hide clues around the house when he was a boy. Treasure maps under couch cushions. Messages taped behind family photos. Even at 42, he still loved puzzles. And now, even in death, he was leaving me one more. The garden shed hadn't been touched in months. Cobwebs hugged the corners, and the air smelled faintly of mulch and motor oil. I flicked on the overhead light, then moved slowly past the gardening gloves, the weed trimmer, and the stacked flower pots I used to tease him for buying but never using. Behind the shelves, the back wall looked ordinary until I noticed the smallest seam in the wood paneling. I pressed my fingers along the edges, and with a quiet click, a narrow panel popped open. Inside was a small, fireproof box. No label, just a combination lock. I knew the code before I even thought. 0612, his birthday. The lock turned. The lid opened. Inside were three things: a flash drive, a black notebook, and a photograph of him with the kids, Lucas on his shoulders, Emily laughing, clinging to his leg. On the back he had written, "If you're holding this, Mom, then I'm counting on you. Phoenix matters more than you know." I felt the tears well before I could stop them, but there wasn't time to fall apart. I brought the flash drive inside, plugged it into the laptop in Jonathan's study, and opened the folder labeled Project Phoenix, Private. Inside were videos, not public presentations or demos. These were personal logs, Jonathan speaking directly to the camera, sometimes at night, sometimes with tired eyes and rumpled clothes. In the first video, dated 5 months before his death, he said, "We're close, but Richard is starting to push the team in the wrong direction. He's meeting with defense contractors behind my back. I've confronted him once. He denied it, of course, but I don't trust him. I need to start backing up the core data separately just in case." Another video. "If you're watching this, Mom, then you already know something's wrong. I didn't want to worry you while I was alive, but Phoenix is more than software. It's a potential breakthrough in early-stage brain diagnostics, AI-supported MRI interpretation. It could catch Alzheimer's 10 years earlier than current methods. PTSD. Developmental issues in kids. It's real, and it can't fall into the wrong hands." I covered my mouth. This wasn't just a passion project. It was a revolution waiting to happen. And Richard Hale wanted to turn it into a tool for war. I copied everything onto a second drive. Then I locked the original in my old jewelry box because no one ever looks for secrets beneath a pile of tangled pearls and broken earrings. Over the next few days, I found myself drifting between two worlds. In the mornings, I packed lunches, braided Emily's hair, and helped Lucas with his science project on magnetism. I read them books at night, stories I had once read to Jonathan by the fireplace, my voice softer now, older, but still steady. In the afternoons, I became someone else. I sat with Tom in Jonathan's office at Barnes Tech, poring over data, emails, security logs, trying to piece together the full extent of Richard's reach. We discovered new accounts, dummy budgets, third-party subcontractors under shell company names. But it was Lucas who asked the question that stopped me cold. We were walking to school together, just the two of us, when he looked up and said, "Grandma, do you think Dad knew he was going to die?" I stopped mid-step. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because he left so many things ready. The video, the will, even a box of old letters for Emily and me. He said to open them when we turn 18. He blinked. "He told you that?" Lucas nodded. He said, "No matter what happens, I'll still be with you." My throat tightened. "Yes," I whispered. I think he knew, and maybe, just maybe, he had known someone would try to bury his work along with him. That afternoon, I called a board meeting. Richard Hale wasn't happy. "Another meeting?" he said, his voice sharp. "What now?" "Transparency," I replied. "The shareholders deserve it." This time, I brought Tom, and I brought the flash drive. I didn't reveal everything, not yet, but I showed them pieces. Jonathan's videos, his concerns about Richard's activities, the defense redirection, the shell accounts. Enough to plant doubt. Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked stunned. Richard tried to control the room with his usual smoothness, but it wasn't working. His smile was tight now. His fingers tapped against the table like a drumbeat of frustration. After the meeting, he cornered me in the hallway. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You don't understand how this world works, Eleanor." "You're right," I said. "I understand how families work, how trust works, and you broke both." He leaned in. "You keep pushing, you're going to dig up things you can't bury again." I didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of the truth, Mr. Hale. Can you say the same?" He didn't answer. He just walked away. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me and whispered, "Do you miss Daddy?" I nodded. "Every day." She reached out and held my hand. "He told me you were the strongest woman he ever knew." I smiled through the tears. "He was wrong, sweet pea. The strongest woman is lying right here under this blanket." She giggled, eyes fluttering closed. I stayed beside her until she slept. Then I went downstairs, opened Jonathan's journal again, and turned to a page I hadn't read yet. At the top, he had written, "If Phoenix lives, we save more than minds. We save families." That was when I made the decision. I wouldn't just protect Phoenix. I would finish it. People think revolutions start with shouting, but sometimes they begin in whispers, in a shared look across a hallway, in a quiet coffee between old friends, in a brave employee who dares to forward an email marked confidential. That's how it began at Barnes Tech. Tom and I didn't kick down doors or fire anyone on the spot. Instead, we listened. We asked questions. We let silence fill the spaces Richard had carefully filled with fear. And one by one, people began to talk. Her name was Priya, a lead engineer on the Phoenix project, mid-30s, brilliant and overworked. She wore cardigans 3 sizes too big and always carried a thermos of chai tea. I caught her in the break room one afternoon, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You're Jonathan's mother," she said softly. I nodded. She hesitated. Then, after a glance around, she whispered, "He never wanted the DoD contract. He fought it. We all did. But Richard threatened to shut down the lab if we didn't play along." I blinked. "He threatened to shut down Phoenix?" She nodded. "Said it wasn't profitable unless it had military applications. We've been running a shadow version of the project on our own time, the one your son actually believed in." My chest tightened. "He called it Phoenix Core," she added. "We didn't tell Richard, just kept working late." Quietly, I reached across the table and touched her hand. "I'd like to see it." And that night, Tom and I sat in a locked lab beneath the main tower, watching Priya and her small team walk us through the version of Phoenix that Jonathan had dreamed about. It was astonishing. Not just algorithms or graphs, but simulated case studies, patient profiles, projections. The system had identified early-stage markers for Alzheimer's in a sample group with 91% accuracy. It had flagged symptoms in a 7-year-old later diagnosed with autism. It had mapped the neural trauma of a firefighter after a major rescue event before any therapist had seen the signs. It was human, compassionate, smart, and full of potential. "This is what John wanted the world to see," I whispered. Priya nodded. "But Richard's version strips all of that away. It's just performance data now. Stress thresholds, predictive behavior for military use." Tom scowled. "How long do you think we have before Richard finds out about this?" Priya hesitated. "Maybe a week. 2, if we're lucky." I took a breath. "Then we need to move faster." Richard didn't wait long to strike back. The next morning, I arrived at Barnes Tech to find a legal envelope waiting on Jonathan's desk. A formal letter, drafted by Richard's attorneys. It stated that, due to my lack of executive experience, the board would be holding a vote of confidence to assess my position as majority shareholder and active overseer of the company. He wanted to push me out, not legally, not overtly, but socially, politically, make me look like a confused old woman clinging to memories. Tom was livid. "This is intimidation, nothing more." But I saw it for what it was, a trap. He was hoping I'd step down quietly, afraid of looking foolish. I wasn't afraid. I called an emergency staff meeting. Not just the board. Everyone. The auditorium hadn't been used in months. Dust lingered on the stage curtains, and the projector flickered uncertainly. But by noon, the space was full engineers, developers, project managers, interns. Even the janitor took a seat near the back. When I stepped on stage, I could feel their eyes. Some curious, some skeptical, a few hopeful. I cleared my throat and gripped the sides of the podium. "My name is Eleanor Barnes," I began. "You may know me as Jonathan's mother. I raised him in a small apartment above a bakery. I was a public school teacher for 40 years. I can't tell you the difference between a gigabyte and a teraflop, but I do know what matters." Silence. I continued. "I know that this company was born out of compassion, out of long nights and hard work and a vision to make things better, not just faster, not just richer, but better." A few heads nodded. I saw Priya watching from the second row. I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive. "My son left behind more than money and patents. He left you, his team, his family, and he trusted you to remember what this work was really about." Then I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with a clip from one of Jonathan's videos. "I didn't build Phoenix to make anyone powerful," he said on screen. "I built it to make people seen, to catch what others miss, to give families more time. That's the legacy I believe in." Oh. When the video ended, the silence broke not with claps, but with something better. Murmurs, soft affirmations, shared glances. I stepped back to the mic. "There's a board vote coming. They'll ask whether I belong here, whether I'm capable." I looked around. "I'll tell you the truth. I don't know all the answers, but I do know when something precious is about to be lost, and I won't let that happen. Not again." The applause started small, then grew. Not wild, not theatrical, but real. I left the stage, not as Jonathan's mother, but as Eleanor Barnes, a woman with something to protect. Later that evening, Tom met me in the parking garage. "You made an impression," he said. "Word spreading. Some of Richard's own people are starting to question him." "Good," I said. He opened the passenger door for me. "Oh," he added, "and Priya's team found something else." I turned. "In one of Jonathan's old sandbox servers," he said, "buried deep. A name we didn't recognize before." "What name?" Tom looked grim. "Project Sparrow." I blinked. "Another system?" "Maybe," he said, "or maybe the key to this whole thing." I looked out at the skyline. Jonathan had left us breadcrumbs, and we were finally learning how to follow them. The name wouldn't leave my mind. Project Sparrow. I wrote it down in Jonathan's old journal, circling it again and again until the pen dug through the page. I whispered it to myself while making Emily's lunch, mouthed it while brushing Lucas's hair, let it sit on my tongue like something sour I couldn't spit out. What was it? Why had Jonathan hidden it so deeply? And why hadn't Richard said a word about it? Tom came by the next morning with 2 coffees and a look that told me he hadn't slept much either. "I did some digging," he said, setting his laptop on the dining table. "There's no record of Sparrow in any public archive, but..." He clicked open a folder. 3 years ago, Jonathan quietly approved funding for something under a shell LLC called Featherlight Diagnostics. It's off books, unofficial, and the last recorded project name was Sparrow. I finished. Tom nodded. He pulled up a scanned invoice. "Here's the twist. That LLC paid a consultant named Felix Moreno, ex-employee. Used to be a senior software architect at Barnes Tech until he was abruptly terminated 18 months ago. No reason given. Just gone. Where is he now?" Tom hesitated. "Somewhere in western Massachusetts. He's off-grid, barely reachable. But I found a phone number linked to a P.O. box in Amherst." I didn't even have to ask. We were going. The drive to Amherst took just under 2 hours, winding through sleepy roads lined with early fall trees. Leaves like gold coins drifted across the windshield, but my stomach stayed knotted the entire way. What if Jonathan hadn't died from natural causes? What if Sparrow had something to do with that? What if Richard? I wasn't ready to say it. Not yet. Felix Moreno lived in a ramshackle cabin surrounded by pine and paranoia. Security cameras hung from the eaves. The doorbell didn't ring. It buzzed, twice, and then a metallic voice crackled through a speaker. "Who are you?" Tom stepped forward. "We're here about Jonathan Barnes. We're not law enforcement. We just want to talk." Silence. Then the sound of locks, 3 of them unclasping. The door creaked open. Felix was wiry, early 40s, with the kind of beard that suggested both genius and solitude. His eyes moved constantly, scanning, processing. "You've got 10 minutes," he said. "Come in." The inside of the cabin looked like a bunker. Maps, monitors, stacks of old hard drives. A kettle hissed on a hot plate. "What do you know about Project Sparrow?" I asked gently, once we sat. He looked at me. "You're his mother." I nodded. He studied me for a moment longer, then said, "Jonathan was the only one who treated me like a human. The others, they used me for my code, then threw me out when I asked too many questions." "What questions?" He sighed. "Sparrow was originally part of Phoenix before it was even called that. It was a failsafe, an AI watchdog, something that could monitor real-time brain activity and flag patterns. Not just medical, but behavioral." I frowned. "What kind of patterns?" He leaned forward. "Aggression, anxiety, fear, potential for violence. Phoenix Core was about healing. Sparrow was about control." My stomach turned. "And Jonathan shut it down?" Tom asked. Felix nodded. "When he saw where it was going, when Richard started pulling in government advisors, I think Jonathan realized Sparrow could be weaponized, used to manipulate behavior, predict threats, not to help people, but to manage them." Tom's face was stone. "Did Richard want it?" "Richard funded it," Felix said. "He tried to move it offshore when Jonathan cut ties. That's when I was fired. They said I'd violated ethics protocols, but it was just a cover." I leaned in. "Do you think Jonathan knew too much?" Felix didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, 3 weeks before Jonathan died, he called me, told me to disappear. Said things were moving faster than he could stop. Said he was being watched. I felt the blood drain from my face. "He sounded scared," Felix whispered. "I think he knew something was coming." On the drive back, I couldn't speak. Tom tried twice but gave up and let silence sit between us like a third passenger. When we pulled into my driveway, the sun had dipped low behind the trees. That's when we saw it. The front door ajar. Tom slammed on the brakes. "Stay in the car." He jumped out, hand on his concealed carry, a habit from his Marine days, one I'd once scolded but now thanked heaven for. I sat frozen, watching him creep up the steps. Then he raised a hand, motioning me forward. "Clear," he said. But someone was here. I stepped inside. The house was in eerie order. Nothing stolen. No drawers ransacked. Just one thing changed. Jonathan's journal. Open. On the desk. Pages dog-eared, not the ones I'd left. And next to it, a single red feather. Not a real one. Plastic. Shiny. Like something from a toy or a party store. But it meant something. "Sparrow." "They know," I whispered. Tom scanned the room. "They're warning you. Or daring me." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the journal, my hands shaking. Emily had crawled in beside me after a nightmare. Lucas slept on the couch downstairs with a baseball bat beside him, his idea. I watched them both, my heart torn between fear and fury. Richard hadn't just tried to steal a company. He was burying truth, choking legacy. And now, he was coming for me. I ran my fingers over the feather again. Then, I opened a new page in the journal and began to write. It's a strange thing what fear does to the mind. For days after the feather appeared, I walked through the house like a woman waiting for the floor to give out beneath her. Every knock at the door startled me. Every flickering streetlight felt like a warning. But fear can only win if you stop moving. And I wasn't ready to stop. The day after the break-in, I gathered Priya and her team in the lab under Barnes Tech, the same hidden corner where Phoenix Core still lived, intact and uncorrupted. "We can't wait anymore," I told them. "Richard's version of Phoenix is about to launch, and once it does, everything you've built will be buried under military contracts and corporate spin." Priya nodded, her jaw set. "We've been ready. We just needed a green light." "You have it now," I said. We spent 3 days refining the demo. Not flashy, not for investors. This version was quiet, profound, and personal. We chose our test subjects, carefully volunteers from a local Alzheimer's support group, teachers working with children on the spectrum, veterans dealing with PTSD, people who stood to benefit most from Phoenix's original mission. When the scans came back, there were tears. Not from the code or the graphs, but from what they represented. Hope. Real, measurable hope. I invited a group of independent scientists, neurospecialists, ethicists, medical AI reviewers to witness the results. None of them left unchanged. "This is 10 years ahead of its time," one whispered. "Number." "It's right on time," I said. But Richard wasn't sitting still. 2 days later, a press release hit the wires. Barnes Tech to unveil advanced behavioral AI at Global Tech Forum. Partnership with DoD confirmed. He was making his move. The launch was set for the following Monday, 4 days away. It would be broadcast globally. A full rebranding of Phoenix, with Richard at the podium, flanked by military officials and industry giants. I read the article twice, my stomach twisting with every line. He was trying to lock it all down before anyone could stop him. And once the world saw Phoenix as a tool of surveillance and control, it wouldn't matter what we said after. The damage would be done. Tom looked at me across the kitchen table. "We have to beat him to the punch." "I don't want a public war," I said. "We don't have to start one," he replied. "Just expose the truth." That night, I stayed up writing letters. To the board, to Phoenix's original investors, to Jonathan's oldest friends in the tech world. I attached data from Phoenix Core, screenshots, testimonies, video clips of Jonathan explaining its purpose. Then I sent it to one more person, Nora Liang, an investigative journalist known for exposing Silicon Valley cover-ups. I didn't know if she'd listen, but I knew Jonathan believed in her. Her articles were bookmarked in his browser. At 3:07 a.m., she replied, "This story is bigger than just AI. I want in. Let's talk." The next morning, I walked into Barnes Tech like I owned it, because legally, I did. Richard was waiting for me in the boardroom, flanked by 2 lawyers and a woman in a sharp red dress I didn't recognize. He smiled thinly. "Eleanor, still playing CEO?" I ignored the jab. "Still pretending to be one?" He chuckled, but his eyes were cold. "I hear you've been busy, whispering to engineers, dredging up old logs, stirring ghosts. I've been uncovering the truth." Same thing, depending on your audience." I opened my folder and slid a page across the table. It was a cease and desist letter. "I'm invoking my rights as majority shareholder. You are hereby ordered to postpone the Phoenix relaunch, pending a full ethics review and board vote." He didn't flinch, just pushed the letter back toward me. "That's cute. It's legal," I replied. He leaned forward. "You're going to lose, Eleanor. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually, you're out of your depth." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what your ex-coup said the week before Jonathan demoted him." His eyes darkened. I stood. "Enjoy your launch, Richard. We'll be watching." That evening, the first article dropped. "The Hidden Heart of Phoenix. Whistleblowers reveal AI's true purpose." Nora Liang had moved fast. Too fast. We hadn't coordinated this leak. I read it with a mix of relief and dread. She hadn't named Priya. But she had quoted internal documents, included footage from one of Jonathan's videos, and published a side-by-side comparison of Phoenix Core and Richard's version. It was explosive. It was also dangerous. Tom called 30 minutes later. "Richard's furious. He's accusing you of espionage, says you leaked proprietary material." "I didn't. I know, but he's going to make a move." "What kind?" Tom hesitated. "I don't think this ends with a lawsuit." I looked out the window. Rain had begun to fall. Slow, heavy, like the sky was trying to cool everything down. But inside me, the fire had only just begun to burn. Jonathan hadn't died for this. Phoenix wasn't his legacy. The fight for it was. It came as no surprise when I was summoned. The email arrived at 6:42 a.m. Subject line, "Urgent executive session, board vote pending." No greeting, no explanation. Just a time, 9 a.m. Sharp, and a location. The glass conference chamber on the top floor of Barnes Tech. Tom paced the living room while I dressed. "They're going to try and take you out," he muttered. "This is a power play." "I know," I said, buttoning my jacket, "and I'm ready." He stopped pacing. "You have the file?" I nodded. 3 copies, 1 for the board, 1 for Nora, 1 for backup. He exhaled, nodded, and handed me a tiny flash drive. Just in case. If things go sideways, plug this into the projector. It's Jonathan. All of him. I took it and slipped it into my purse. You still think he recorded more than we've seen? Tom nodded. I'm sure of it. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Tall windows, frosted glass, a long mahogany table that stretched further than it needed to, like it was trying to keep everyone apart. Richard sat at the head, already smiling when I arrived. To his left, the red-dressed woman legal counsel, I guessed. Around the table were the board members, some older than me, others young and impeccably polished. I recognized maybe half by name. I took my seat without a word. The room dimmed. A large screen on the wall lit up. Richard began. Ladies and gentlemen, he said smoothly, in light of recent breaches of protocol and unilateral disclosures to the media, we convene today to vote on whether Miss Eleanor Barnes shall retain her position as majority representative of Barnes Tech's strategic direction. He gestured, and the lawyer beside him began distributing printed ballots. Before we vote, I said, standing, I'd like to speak. He raised an eyebrow. The floor is yours for now. I ignored him and turned to the board. I'm not here to defend myself, I said. I'm here to remind you of something we all seem to have forgotten, what this company was built for. I clicked the remote. Jonathan's face appeared on the screen, one of his private videos. But this one was different. He looked tired, drawn. There was fear in his eyes. If you're watching this, he said, then I'm likely not around anymore. And that means Richard Hale has succeeded in pushing Phoenix toward military ends. Murmurs rippled across the table. He'll claim it's necessary, Jonathan continued, that our tech has dual use. But you have to understand he's trying to revive a sub-project called Sparrow. It was designed to predict threat behavior in real time. I killed it once. He's trying to bring it back. The video ended. Silence. Then I spoke. Jonathan terminated Sparrow for a reason. He believed in prevention, not profiling. He believed Phoenix could save lives, not monitor them. I looked at each member of the board. Today, you're not voting on me. You're voting on what Barnes Tech stands for. And if you remove me, you remove the last barrier between Phoenix and misuse. A long pause. Then one board member, Linda Owens, the CFO, cleared her throat. I joined this company 15 years ago because Jonathan convinced me we were building something humane, she said. I've watched Richard cut corners, sideline developers, and spin stories for the press. She looked across the table. I vote to retain Eleanor Barnes. Gasps. Then another voice. I second. Richard's jaw clenched. But votes began to fall like dominoes. 6 for Ellie. 4 for Richard. 1 abstained. He stood, his hands clenched. This isn't over, he hissed. No, I said quietly. But your reign is. We didn't even make it down the hallway before Priya called. Ellie, she said breathless. It's happening. What is? We just got locked out of the Phoenix mainframe. Military branch only. Admin override activated from an internal node. Tom grabbed the phone. Are you saying someone inside is hijacking it? Yes, she said. And they're using Sparrow protocols. My blood ran cold. They're launching it anyway, I whispered. Tom looked at me, eyes sharp. We have to stop it, he said. I nodded. And we ran. Time felt like a fist around my throat. We drove faster than I'd ever let Tom drive tires, screeching around corners, red lights bleeding into horn blasts and angry shouts. The Barnes Tech campus came into view like a battleship rising from fog. They've breached internal firewalls, Priya said over speakerphone. Whoever it is, they're not just accessing Phoenix. They're rewriting parts of it. From inside? Tom asked. Yes, from Jonathan's own dev credentials. I felt my breath catch. That's impossible, I whispered. Unless someone cloned his key logs, Priya said. Or, unless someone's been planning this since before he died. The words hit me like a punch. This wasn't sabotage. It was premeditation. When we reached the building, the elevator was dead. We ran. 6 flights. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I didn't stop. The lab was chaos. Flashing error messages. Screens filled with scrolling code in red. Engineers shouting. Priya hunched over a console, sweat dotting her forehead. We've isolated the breach node, she said. It's coming from the upstairs server farm. Someone plugged in a direct relay. Old school hardware hack. No IP trail. Tom turned to go. I'll find it. Scracked. I grabbed his wrist. Be careful. He nodded once and was gone. I turned to Priya. How long do we have? 5 minutes. Maybe less. Once the update finalizes, the military version goes live globally. The ethical safeguards will be stripped out. Real-time surveillance capabilities enabled. And Sparrow's behavior protocols injected into civilian datasets. She paused. If that happens, Phoenix becomes a tool of control. I looked around. So many brilliant minds. So much effort, all for something now teetering between miracle and monster. Then I heard Jonathan's voice in my head. Finish what I started. I'm pulling core, I said. Priya blinked. What? I'm pulling Phoenix core out of the Barnes Tech system. Right now. That's not Eleanor. It's embedded in 6 proprietary frameworks. If we extract it live, then we lose the building, but not the soul. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, she said softly. Let's do it. The room transformed into a war zone. Priya barked orders. Her team moved like a hive. One engineer monitored the fail-safe disconnect sequence. Another prepared the secure drives. I stood near the terminal, watching line after line of Jonathan's original code scroll past like a goodbye letter. 30 seconds, someone called. Just then, Tom's voice crackled through Priya's headset. I found the relay. Far corner of the server farm, buried behind a dummy server. It's not just hardwired, it's got a secondary processor. Someone's running this externally and locally. Can you cut it? Priya asked. I can destroy it. Do it, I said. A second later, the lights in the lab flickered. The screens blinked once. Then again. Then? We're out, Priya yelled. Core successfully extracted. Update blocked at 96%. Cheers erupted, and I felt my knees give. Priya caught me before I hit the floor. It's done, she said. No, I said, gasping. Now we show them why. An hour later, Nora Liang published a second exposé. Mother, teacher, guardian. How Eleanor Barnes saved a generation's future. It included a full summary of the blocked update, evidence of the backdoor exploit, screenshots of the Sparrow code embedded in the DoD version, and most importantly, a download link. Phoenix Core, open source, for the world. Clean. Uncompromised. Jonathan's version. No military strings. Just hope. By sundown, Barnes Tech's board called for an emergency reorganization. Richard Hale did not attend. A warrant was issued for his arrest 36 hours later. They found him trying to board a private jet in Rhode Island. I didn't feel triumph when I heard the news. Just silence. And finally, peace. That night, Lucas asked if he could sleep in my bed. He curled up beside me, small but brave. Are the bad guys gone? He asked. For now, I whispered. But there will always be more. That's why we stay ready. He nodded, eyes drifting shut. You stayed ready, he said, like Dad said you would. I kissed the top of his head. No, I whispered. I just stayed true. Victory, it turns out, doesn't come with confetti. There's no parade when you save something invisible. No applause when the world continues on, blissfully unaware of what almost happened. The enemy fades, the fire cools, and suddenly, there you are, alone, holding the torch that no one saw you carry. The week after Richard's arrest was filled with meetings, interviews, and phone calls. Reporters wanted quotes. The board wanted next steps. The engineers wanted direction. Everyone seemed to be waiting for me to say what came next. But I didn't know. I wasn't Jonathan. I was just his mother. Tom tried to cheer me up. He brought over homemade chili and a 6-pack of root beer one evening, and we sat on the back porch, watching dusk settle over the trees. You're not acting like someone who just took down a corporate snake and saved the future of ethical AI, he said. I smiled faintly. That's a long job title to fit on a business card. Ellie, I'm tired, I admitted. He nodded. You've been fighting every hour for weeks. Now your body and your mind are catching up. It's not just that. I stared into the trees. It's when you spend all your energy trying to protect something, and then it's safe, what do you do with your hands? With your heart? Tom leaned back in his chair. You build, he said. That's what people like you do after storms. You build again, Priya called the next morning. We're getting emails from research hospitals, autism centers, neurology labs, all asking how to integrate Phoenix Core. That fast? It's spreading like wildfire, she said, then paused. But carefully. That's the beauty of open source. It grows with intention. She hesitated. And we want you to name the new branch. He blinked. Me? You carried it here. You earned that. I thought for a moment, then said, call it Kindling. Ah, Kindling? It's small, simple, but it starts something that keeps people warm. Priya was quiet a moment. That's beautiful, she whispered. That afternoon, I picked Lucas and Emily up from school. They ran to me, backpacks bouncing, cheeks pink from the cold. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. Lucas picked mint chocolate chip. Emily asked for strawberry swirl with rainbow sprinkles. I ordered coffee. I always order coffee. We sat on a bench in the park, the sun dipping behind the courthouse dome in the distance. Lucas leaned against me. Grandma? Yes, love? Can I ask you something hard? Always. End of Cree. He fiddled with the wooden spoon in his ice cream. Were you scared? I looked at him. When? When all the bad stuff was happening. When you went to the meetings and yelled at the bad man and had did all the grown-up things. I smiled. Yes, I said. I was scared every day. He was quiet. But I did it anyway, I added. He nodded. That's what I want to be like, he whispered. Not scared, just brave anyway. I kissed the top of his head, my eyes blurring. You already are, sweetheart, I said. You already are. That evening, as I sorted through old files on Jonathan's laptop, things the lawyers said I should archive, I noticed a blinking icon in the corner of the screen. Phoenix Core. Milestone message ready. I clicked it. The screen went black. Then Jonathan appeared. He was in the old lab, wearing his favorite navy hoodie, hair messy, eyes sparkling. Hi, Mom, he said, grinning. I couldn't breathe. If you're seeing this, it means Core launched. It means we made it, and I wish I were there to hug you. He looked down for a second, as if embarrassed. I always knew you'd do it. Not because you're fearless, but because you care harder than anyone I've ever known. You taught me that brains matter, yes, but so do hearts. He leaned closer to the camera. I don't know what happens next, but I trust you. And I hope Phoenix doesn't become my legacy. I hope you do, because people won't remember the code, but they'll remember the kindness that made it worth using. The video faded. I sat still, staring at the screen. Then, slowly, I reached for the keyboard and typed, I remember. It began with a letter, not the kind scribbled in grief or whispered through digital screens, but printed on thick ivory stock, sealed with a silver crest. From the Franklin Biomedical Institute, London, UK. Subject, Invitation to Keynote, AI for Humanity, Symposium. I stared at it over my morning tea, blinking twice to make sure it wasn't a prank. Me? A keynote speaker? In London? Emily walked in wearing socks that didn't match and carrying her favorite plush rabbit. Why are you smiling like that? She asked, crawling onto my lap. I think someone wants me to talk about Jonathan's work. In another country. She gasped. Are you gonna go? I'm thinking about it. Can I come? I kissed the top of her head. Maybe. She grinned. I'll bring Bunny. He's good at talking to grown-ups. 2 weeks before that letter, we'd officially launched the Jonathan E. Barnes Foundation, a nonprofit devoted to ethical AI in medicine and education. We started small. A grant for rural clinics using Phoenix Core to monitor early-stage dementia. A pilot program in a middle school to help children with sensory processing issues. A mobile van equipped with neuroscan kits for underserved neighborhoods. The foundation's logo was simple. A small flame, shaped like a bird. Kindling, Priya came up with it. Then promptly refused to put her name on anything corporate-sounding. So I made her the first director of development, which she pretended to hate and secretly cherished. Tom helped draft the ethics charter, 7 pages of plain language, promising never to sell or militarize anything that came from Phoenix Core. We posted it publicly. No fine print, just truth. People responded, not just in tech, but in schools, hospitals, families. We began receiving letters not from companies, but from parents. Your program caught my daughter's focus problems before the teachers did. My father now knows why he forgets the oven. My son finally sleeps at night, thank you. Every time I read one, I cried. Every time I thought, you did this, Jonathan, and you're still doing it. At Hartford Elementary, we launched our first Phoenix Light unit scaled down, non-invasive, and fully guided by pediatric specialists. Lucas volunteered to help set it up. He said he wanted to make sure no one messed up the wires. He also just liked computers. Emily, shy at first, stood near the doorway holding her bunny tight. One of the school counselors knelt beside her. Do you know why we're doing this, sweetie? Emily nodded. To help the quiet kids feel louder. End of 12. The counselor blinked. That's a beautiful way to say it. It's what my daddy wanted, she added. To help kids talk, even if their brain doesn't know how yet. I turned away before my tears spilled. Later that day, she handed me a drawing phoenix with rainbow wings, carrying little children in its claws, not like prey, but like precious gems. I think Dad can see it now, she said softly. I think so too, I whispered. Tom and I began walking every Sunday. No agenda. No talking about lawsuits or boardrooms or bad men with slick suits. Just two old friends, letting the seasons pass. Do you miss the chaos? He asked once. Sometimes, I admitted, but I don't miss the fear. He nodded. Then he added, you know, you can still do big things. I laughed. I think I've done enough for 2 lifetimes. He looked at me. That's not what I meant. I didn't answer, but that night, when I lay in bed, I pulled out the London invitation again. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter reading it. I felt ready. A week later, we gathered at the town library where I used to read stories to preschoolers for the official community event, The Light We Keep. It was meant to honor Jonathan, but it ended up honoring something larger. Hope, effort, legacy. I gave a short speech. Nothing dramatic. Just one truth. You don't have to be brilliant to change the world, I said. You just have to care hard enough. And refuse to stop. They gave me flowers, a plaque, but my favorite moment came after, when a quiet boy approached me with a hand-drawn picture of a robot holding hands with a grandmother. She's helping him learn kindness, he said. I smiled. She's still learning too, I whispered. I almost didn't get on the plane. Something about the gate, the beeping of boarding passes, the sterile smiles of flight attendants, the rush of polished strangers in tailored coats made me freeze. I stood there, clutching my boarding pass like it might burn through my fingers. And for a moment, I heard my old doubts whispering. You're a school teacher. You don't belong at a global tech symposium. You're just a mother who stumbled into something big. You don't have a PhD. You have a garden. You have no right to speak. Then I remembered Jonathan's face. That video? They'll remember the kindness that made it worth using. I took a breath and stepped on board. London was gray and soft, like an old cardigan worn thin by history. The taxi from Heathrow drove me through streets older than our nation buildings, with soot in their bones and stories in their chimneys. Red buses, black cabs, the river winding like a silver thought through the heart of the city. I stayed at a modest hotel near Russell Square. Nothing fancy, just a place with hot tea, soft towels, and a window overlooking a tiny garden where pigeons argued over crumbs. The night before the symposium, I couldn't sleep. I laid out my outfit navy blue, the color Jonathan always said brought out my strength, and stared at it like armor. I didn't rehearse. I didn't write a speech. I just thought about what mattered. The next morning, I stood backstage behind a velvet curtain, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. A host in a sleek blazer leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready, Mrs. Barnes?" "No," I said honestly. He blinked. "But I'll do it anyway." He smiled and nodded. "That's how the best ones start." I stepped out. The lights were bright. The room full scientists, journalists, ethicists, young students clutching notebooks. I stood behind the podium, took one look at the teleprompter, and turned it off. "My name is Eleanor Barnes," I said. "I'm not an engineer. I don't have a degree in data science. I've never written a line of code, but I raised someone who did." A pause. My son, Jonathan, believed that technology could be both brilliant and kind, that it could think and feel, that intelligence means nothing if it doesn't serve humanity. I told them about Phoenix, but not the specs. The story, the sickness we didn't see coming, the time we lost, the hope we built from it, the betrayal, the courage, the fire. I told them what it means to lose a child and still believe in building something that saves others. By the time I was done, the room was silent, not heavy, reverent, and when they stood to applaud, I didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I felt whole. After the session, I found myself seated beside a woman named Dr. Miriam Hall, Professor Emeritus from Oxford, with silver hair in a perfect bun and a voice like warm brandy. "You reminded me of why I started all this," she said. "Not for the papers, not for the patents, but for the children who couldn't explain what hurt." I nodded. Then she added, "I lost a son once. Long ago. He wasn't famous, but he was kind." Our eyes met. No more words were needed. We sat there, two mothers who had built different kinds of legacies, and held each other up. The next morning, I walked alone along the Thames. The wind was brisk. The water moved like time never quite still, always whispering. I stopped near a bench and sat, clutching my scarf. I thought about Jonathan, not just the man, but the boy who once built robots out of cereal boxes, who cried when he couldn't fix a broken toy, who once said, "I want to make the world less confusing for people." I looked at the water and spoke quietly. "I kept it alive, sweetheart. A pause. And I think I'm going to keep living, too." The wind tugged at my coat like a hug. I smiled, then stood, and walked forward. Coming home felt different this time. Not like returning from battle or stumbling out of some long shadow. It felt light. I stepped off the plane, the Hartford air crisp and familiar. Tom met me at arrivals, holding a cardboard sign that said, "World Saver," in bold Sharpie letters. I laughed. "I figured you deserved a dramatic welcome," he said, hugging me. "How was London?" "Grey, grand, and exactly what I needed." We drove home in easy silence, the kind that only exists between people who've already said the important things. The kids met me at the door. Lucas hugged me tight, whispering, "I told everyone at school my grandma fights bad guys with kindness." Emily simply held out a drawing. Me, standing on a stage, with 1,000 tiny birds flying out from behind me like light. "I missed you," she said. "I missed me too," I replied. A week later, I was invited to speak at the local university, nothing grand, just a small seminar in the psychology department. What I didn't expect was Lucas asking if he could come. "I want to say something," he said. "About Dad." I nodded, surprised. The room was full of students, professors, and a few curious townsfolk. The theme was technology and empathy. I gave a short talk, less about Phoenix, more about people. Then I stepped aside, and Lucas stood up. He was 10. His voice cracked once, but he didn't flinch. "My dad made something really smart," he said, "but my grandma made it kind. That's the difference. And I think we should make more things that are kind, because sometimes people don't know how to say what's wrong. But machines can help, if they listen right." The applause was quiet but deep, and I don't think I've ever been prouder. That night, Emily climbed into my lap with a shoebox. "I found something in the attic," she said. Inside was a dusty old cassette recorder. He blinked. "I think it was Daddy's," she added. It was. I remembered the clunky little thing. Jonathan used to carry it around when he was 7, pretending he was a news anchor. He once interviewed our cat for 20 minutes. Emily pressed play. The audio crackled. Then his young voice. "This is Jonathan Barnes, reporting live from the living room. Today, my mom made pancakes. She is the best pancake maker in the universe, and I love her forever." My throat closed. Emily looked up. "Do you think he meant it forever? Forever?" I nodded. "I do." I started writing the next day. Not code, not grants. A book. I didn't know what it would be at first. A memoir? A guide? A story? But I knew the first line. This is not a story about machines. It's a story about mercy. Each morning, I'd pour a cup of tea, sit by the window, and type. Some days I only wrote a paragraph. Others, I wrote until the sun set. It wasn't about being right. It was about being honest. About showing how technology didn't save my family, people did. People like Priya, who kept faith when it was risky. Like Tom, who stood beside me without asking for credit. Like Lucas, who reminded me that bravery comes in small voices. Like Emily, who showed me that memory is something we carry and something we give. And like Jonathan, who built a tool to catch what we missed. Because sometimes, the difference between despair and hope is just one person who chooses not to look away. The book was halfway done when I realized something strange. I didn't feel haunted anymore, not by what I'd lost, but by what I almost gave up. My voice, my fight, myself. And in writing, I wasn't preserving Jonathan. I was becoming Eleanor Barnes, not just the woman who loved him, but the woman he helped shape. And maybe that was his greatest invention of all. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for the storm. Not for the pain, not for the fear, but for what it forced me to become. Before all this, I was simply a mother, a teacher, a woman living quietly in the echo of her son's brilliance. I loved Jonathan with every inch of me. And when I lost him, I thought I had lost my purpose too. But purpose, it turns out, doesn't die with the people we love. It waits. It waits in old journals, in forgotten code, in the voices of children still learning to speak. It waits in worn shoes beside school beds, in whispered prayers over tea, in cassette tapes tucked into attic corners. And when you're ready, when the grief softens just enough for light to get through, it comes back to you. Not loudly, just gently, like a child's hand finding yours in the dark. These days, my mornings are simple. I write. I walk. I answer emails from clinics halfway around the world. I read bedtime stories. I listen to the sound of my grandchildren laughing in the backyard. Phoenix Core lives on, not as a weapon, not as a trophy, but as a promise. A promise that healing doesn't have to be cold. That memory can be mapped, yes, but also honored. And that no matter how advanced we become, we still need what we've always needed. To be seen, to be heard, to be loved. If you're listening to this story, maybe you've lost someone too. Maybe you're sitting alone tonight, wondering what's left when everything familiar is gone. If so, let me tell you, you're still here. And that matters. More than you know. Because sometimes, the most radical thing a person can do is stay. Stay soft. Stay kind. Stay curious. Stay you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find, as I did, that in the quiet aftermath of loss, there's still a light burning. Not from the past, but from within. Because you never know. You might be someone's phoenix, and they're just waiting for your light to rise. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the number 1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter. A new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.